Good day and welcome to Conversations with AARP in the Virgin Islands. I'm Troy Deshabert Schuster, State Director of AARP in this territory. And today we have a very interesting show, especially with regard to all of the challenges and stresses of dealing with COVID-19. So today we have two clinical psychologists, licensed psychologists here in the Virgin Islands from Island Therapy Solutions. First, we have with us Dr. Rita Dudley Grant, and then also Dr. Wayne Etheridge. Good day, doctors.
Good
How are you
morning.
doing today?
Good morning.
Good morning, Troy. Good to meet you.
Happy to be here.
Here.
Great. Again, thank you for being with us today. And we have so much to discuss because so many people are going through many great challenges of dealing with COVID-19. But first of all, Dr. Grant, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from. I know you're a Virgin Islander. What brought you to St. Croix to Island Therapy Solutions, and what is your specific role with Island Therapy Solutions?
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Yes, I am a proud Virgin Islander, and I can completely claim it because I was born and raised in St. Thomas, and then I spent 20 years getting educated and experienced in Boston and around in the New England area, and then moved back home in 1987. And I was working with government, Assistant Commissioner of Health, and also married my wonderful husband, Richard, and we moved to St. Croix, and that has kept me here. So I am now longer living on St. Croix than in St. Thomas. So I know both islands and love them both very, very well. And at Island Therapy, after I left government, I worked at Virgin Islands Behavioral Services in residential care as clinical director, and now my third act, which is something that anyone that would like to can come to our third act group that Dr. Etheridge and I will be running in the fall, where we sort of reinvent ourselves and figure out what is the next role for me. And I was trained as a clinician, but never worked as a therapist full time for my entire career until now. And it has been a thrill. I really enjoy providing direct care to individuals working through challenges, especially now. So here I am at Island Therapy, a wonderful place to work and an even better place to receive services.
Excellent. Yes, I always hear wonderful things about Island Therapy Solutions. And of course, you have a great reputation as a psychologist here in the Virgin Islands. And Dr. Etheridge, tell us about yourself. Where are you from originally? What brought you to St. Croix? And what is your role at Island Therapy Solutions?
Thanks, Troy. My dad was full-time Army, so I'm a military brat. Traveled several countries. With my family, finished high school in the Washington, D.C. area, moved to Atlanta, and I visited St. Croix on a vacation, and that's almost the end of the story. I went home, sold everything, and here I am. I moved here in 1988, and I thoroughly enjoy being here, the people, and participating in the community. And I really enjoy working with folks at Island Therapy Solutions.
Excellent. And so you've been here since 1988. You're an honorary Crucian now.
Thank you.
Welcome to the family.
I'll take that. All right.
Honorary Crucian. That's right. One of us. And so now, as we've been in this pandemic for some 6 months, we started hearing a lot in the news early on about an increase in domestic violence. It seems like we're not hearing much about that anymore. Is that domestic violence still a big problem in the territory now as we continue to face the pandemic? And not only that, but are there other emotional problems that you're seeing coming to the surface now? Either one of you can answer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say definitely domestic violence continues to be a concern. An increase in domestic violence, which is coupled with an increase in substance abuse of various sorts. Whenever there is this sort of shut down, which is very important for our physical well-being, but it can definitely be stressful. And I would never minimize, there is another one, which is an increase in suicides, which is the saddest end of the high stress when people lose hope altogether. So the stress of being in this kind of a, unknown situation, which we will talk more about, but it results for anyone who may have been doing very well and not even realizing the challenges that they were having internally, but this just magnifies it. And if you had some underlying concerns or stressors and you don't see any way out and you haven't been able to reach out for help, then you do end up sort of expressing a lot more. You either act it out against someone else or against yourself.
Right.
And
I think, as Dr. Grant said, we see behaviors in many ways that express how people are feeling, and not just adults. Troy, children also pick up on what's going on, and if they're old enough to where their routines or their daily lives have changed by not being in school or not seeing their friends or extended family, they start to act out in different ways also. It's just a way of communicating for children who may not be able to put their feelings into words. They behave in sometimes uncharacteristic manners.
Mm-hmm.
right, right. It must be terribly hard on children, especially because they're still at an age where they're trying to come to an understanding of how to express their feelings in an appropriate way
Right.
during those formative years, and so sometimes those feelings may be expressed in unhealthy ways, especially under extreme stress, or if they themselves are being abused or neglected.
Right. And if they see their parents modeling unhealthy expressions, like Dr. Grant mentioned, alcohol or drug abuse or violence in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And we've heard of so much of that, and especially I've heard over the years that for many of the children in our community, school is an escape, right? So they get
Yes.
out of the home and they find some kind of solace being in school, and so very unfortunately for a lot of our young children, again, I've heard that the meal that they get in school is like the only nutritious meal they have for the day. And now they're withheld or prevented from a lot of that. So let's be
Right.
terribly.
Right. And I think, school provides some boundaries for kids. They, things are somewhat predictable. They know when the school starts. They know, they're sitting next to this person. They know what their lesson is about. They know how to interact with their teacher. They're walking down the same hallways. So things are predictable. And at home, sometimes they're not. And that can be traumatic.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there is a tremendous amount of stress on the whole family because parents are thrust into the role of being teachers and monitoring the schoolwork that's being presented by the teachers on this very somewhat unfamiliar platform, so to speak. And so the parents are already, trying to handle multiple priorities in a day between letting the children do their schoolwork, monitoring that, and then also their own work if they're working from home, and or figuring out childcare if they have to go out, but there's no school for the children to go to. So there are many, many, many unknowns now that definitely contribute to, but out of chaos is also opportunity. And I think it's important for us to really encourage people to think about, okay, what are the ways? Because there are many, many different ways that we can use this as a time to be much more creative, to be more flexible, to bond in different ways. And we see that coming a lot on the TV and in the newspapers. There's a lot of advice being given, and I think it's important to encourage people to try one or two things that will help to reduce their stress and, help them to cope more with COVID. Yeah.
And so, Dr. Etheridge, during this time of pandemic, what would you say are some of the signs that a family member or friend may be exhibiting if they're having mental health challenges, especially in relation to the pandemic? Are you seeing any specific indicators that you may not see at other times? Anything unusual, different during this time of a pandemic as far as indicators are concerned?
I think sometimes uncharacteristic behaviors, people that might normally shop and do their own cooking, and then they stop doing that, or people that would come and be part of a choir or be part of an exercise group. And since many of those activities have been terminated, all of a sudden you're not seeing your friend or your family member anymore. And there's a tendency to isolate, and that is never a good option. So I think you're just looking at behaviors, and if behaviors are changing, that's something to pay attention to. Or as Dr. Grant mentioned earlier, there's a risk of hopelessness for some people, and hopelessness can be verbalized as, I'm giving up, or I'm giving away all my stuff, all the things that say that they're thinking about hurting themselves or ending their life. And you want to pay attention to that.
Yeah, there is another one too that we look for a lot is irritability. When people just don't have the patience, the forbearance, the understanding, much more quick to anger, much more willing to walk away. When there is that lost in interest, but there's also that tendency to not be, the children running around the house used to be like a fun thing, or, the little ones that are trying to draw, and all of a sudden you just like, I don't have any more time for this. And so there is that increase in tension and emotion. And people can almost have that sense of what is happening to me, what is wrong with me? And I think one of the messages that we really want to send is, it is not you. It is the situation. It is a completely untenable, unpredictable in some ways, and we'll talk more about that, situation where you have to really acceptance is a big one. Accept that you don't have control. This is not something that and you're going to make it happen. And there's a lot of things that we can't control. The only thing that we actually can control is accepting a lack of control and then calming ourselves down.
Exactly. You said something that really resonated with me regarding irritability. In full personal disclosure, in a manner of speaking, I found myself becoming irritable, with family and loved ones as this pandemic set in. And I had to catch myself, as we would say in our dialect. I had to catch myself and step back, and I had to return to my meditations. I had to even go back to doing yoga. I had stopped doing yoga for a while. I still need to get back to chanting with you all, the good Buddhist chanting. Namyo Horenge Kyo.
That's it. Namyo Horenge Kyo.
Right. But I really had to step back and reflect on myself and what was going on around me, and come back to center. But thankfully I had the presence of mind to do that. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that. They don't step back and engage in self-reflection, and then they go down that slippery slope of more and more irritability. And then they end up in violence, So,
or substance abuse sometimes is an indicator.
Right. Exactly. So that kind of brings us to the importance of self-care and, taking that time. You mentioned a few of the things, that meditation, the chanting, the prayer, and also talking with others. A part of self-care, we like to make the distinction between, we talk now about social distancing, but we want to say, don't think of it as social distancing, think of it as physical distancing, because you can be very physically distant from people and being safe, but still very connected, whether this kind of a medium or simply, picking up the phone, going for a walk socially distanced, being in the same area, even though you're not together, because that communication with other people is a critical part of helping you to kind of get out of yourself and to not feel like you are alone and overwhelmed, and the best antidote to feeling sorry and upset is to try and see if you can help somebody else. All of a sudden you're feeling very sad and lonely, and then you pick up the phone and you realize, oh my, and so then that's that, and that other person will appreciate the call, or appreciate the contact. Some of those kind of simple things that one can do to move in self-care.
I also want to add that as Virgin Islanders, we are very resilient. Mm-hmm. If you think about the hurricanes that we've been through, personally since Hugo, up through Maria, when we have a hurricane, there's some similarities between what's going on with COVID and what happens when we're dealing with the aftermath of a storm. Things are not available. How do we communicate with other people? What is it that we do while we're waiting for power to come back? Mm-hmm. How can we pull together a trip to the grocery store if they're even open? And there's a lot of taking care of yourself that happens during that post-storm period that we can use during this time. Make sure that you get outside every day. Do something physical. Just taking a walk. We live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. Sometimes just walking outside can remind us that, the ocean is calm and the waves are happening and the birds are flying. Life is coming back. Life is going on around us. I'm just going through something. So exercise, as Dr. Grant said, communicate with other people. What if you use this time to learn something new? Like how to play the ukulele, or how to speak Spanish, or how to dance, something that you can do in your home. I'm learning to cook, which is an unbelievable thing for me to do. Nobody else is eating it, but I'm learning. So there are things that you can do. One of the things I wanted to say, though, about yoga and meditation is that it's a human tendency, when we have a whole lot of time and we're not focused on other things, to really pay attention to our negative thoughts. What's going to happen? How am I going to do this? What's going to happen 2 weeks? All that kind of thinking usually just spins us off into anxiety or depression. It's so important to have a plan, once you recognize that you're having those negative thoughts, how to step out of them. And that's what meditation provides, or that's what yoga provides, or that's what talking with friends provides, that you come out of your frame of reference for your thinking and you become more engaged in other areas. And that allows us to feel more connected, more healthy.
And Dr. Etheridge, that point of having a plan, I think that is actually a really important self-care tool, because even though we don't know how to control COVID, how to, what are the ways that we can actually keep ourselves healthy and well and whatever, we can control what we're doing in a day. We need to make sure that, and I'm speaking now to myself, titrate the amount of time that you spend looking at television. I'm a political junkie, and I know that. But at the same time, it's important to turn the television off, to walk outside, to really look at this paradise that we live in. All of the other things that Dr. Etheridge mentioned, because, as he was saying, we talk about what is the new normal, and how do we get some control, some predictability. And I'm quoting Dr. Etheridge now, because the real issue is, how do we have control? How do we have predictability? What is it that we can for sure know? And one of the things we can for sure know is what we're going to try and do each day to practice some self-care.
Exactly. And another thing that was mentioned earlier in with regard to this particular question is about moving beyond oneself to do good for others. I'm often reminded of the great psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl.
Yes.
I've read all of his writings, and as you know, he was a Jewish psychiatrist in Nazi Germany, ended up in the concentration camp. And as he was in there, he looked around him and realized that some seemingly very strong, able-bodied people were dying quickly, and some very weak and frail people he would never think would survive were surviving. And so he started, doing his research right there in the concentration camp, and came to discover that those people who had something or someone beyond their self, outside of their self, that they were living for, or maybe even somebody in the concentration camp right there that they were
Right.
helping,
Right.
they were the ones surviving because they weren't focused on their own misery.
Right.
And so he wrote a wonderful book, one of his great books, Man's Search for Meaning.
Right.
And I think that every human being needs to read that book. And you realize the great power there is in helping others and focusing on the needs of others.
Right.
And we become strong. I mean, it's a basic Christian principle, but even on a purely secular or psychiatric or psychological level,
Right.
it's very, very pertinent. So again, that moving beyond. And talking about that, a lot of older people in our community and all around the world were those types of individuals helping others, taking care of their grandchildren and so forth. And now a lot of them are not able to do that because of social distancing. And we're seeing that more and more older people are becoming more and more isolated. Can you tell us some of those consequences for an older person who is experiencing too much social isolation?
Yes, I mean, I think one of the things that we have emphasized a lot is the importance of recognizing social isolation as something that we need to address. Specifically, one of my good friends, Cora Christian, and her husband, Simon Jones Hendrickson, they started social distancing and quarantining immediately before the rest of us. They were very prescient. Of course, as you know, Dr. Christian is excellent in healthcare. And so the other day, her daughter said, someone came to me and said, well, how are your parents making out because they're so alone all the time? And she said, not at all. They are on Zoom calls several times a week. Cora's the one that's really kind of behind the scenes driving the whole COVID response for the health department. I mean, the point is that physical distancing does not mean social distancing. It just means that you use the tools at our command to stay connected. So I think those older persons, this is now, you want to talk about learning something, teach yourself how to learn to use all of these wonderful gadgets and, technologies and Zoom and, everything. I mean, it is a steep learning curve, but it's well worth it. And that's the way, I think, that's something to learn, is how to use Zoom on your phone, how to really use the technology that is at our fingertips to stay connected with loved ones.
I think loneliness is a real precursor to other mental health issues. And as we're learning more about the negative effects of loneliness, we see how it leads to other things that are not very good for people. And I would recommend, if you know some older folks, whether they're related to you or not, to reach out, give them an opportunity to say something, listen to what they have to say, ask them about their history, ask them what life was like when they were growing up, see if you can make a connection with them in some way. And I think that really will spark them out of, some loneliness that they may be experiencing at the moment. So you don't necessarily need to go and sit and have a cup of coffee or tea with them. You could, as Dr. Grant said, Zoom in with them. Mm-hmm. You can, if they're next door to you, ask them, do you need anything? I'm going to the store. Could I help you do something? As you were talking earlier, Troy, about the positive effects personally of making a connection, of reaching out to someone else. This is why volunteerism is such a big thing, because people that do volunteer receive the benefit personally. It feels good to do something, and it keeps you engaged, so you're not sitting home thinking about what's going to happen. I can't predict what's going to go on with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
I just want to throw one bit of science in here. In fact, what we now know is that neurons, what fires together wires together. So when you are doing these good things and you are helping yourself to feel better, you literally are healing your brain. You're overcoming the depression, which is an imbalance in your neurochemicals. So it's a really healthy thing. It's not only physically good, it's not only spiritually good, it is the whole package.
And to bring all of that together when it comes to helping others, and when we're talking about the older people who may be very lonely, well, spend some extra time visiting an older relative or friend, and that reminiscing is so important.
Right.
Getting
Right.
them to talk about their early adulthood, getting them to talk about their childhood, etc. And that reminiscing really works the hippocampus, as it were,
Absolutely.
and helps to become more retentive
Right.
Yes.
as far as the memory is concerned. So, with regard to those who have been suffering with mental illness before the pandemic, do you find that the pandemic has increased or exacerbated their symptoms of mental illness that they may have been coping with prior?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because, it's unpredictable, because they don't know what's going to happen, just like the rest of us. How am I going to deal with whatever it was that was going on with them? And for some of them, they tend to lose track of staying on top of their medication. So we have to order a little bit farther ahead to make sure that whatever medication these folks might be needing is available for them. So we almost need to ask somebody to monitor them sometimes, just to make sure that they're taking their medication correctly and that they have enough to continue to care for themselves.
Definitely. Whenever there's a stress and disaster of any kind, and this is certainly a pandemic, of epic proportions, it is going to stress you, and stress exacerbates all illnesses, and mental illness is just another one of the physiologically based illnesses. So no question, everything that Dr. Etheridge said, that we as caregivers need to be mindful of, and to encourage those that are having emotional issues to be more mindful themselves of making sure that they're taking their medicine, that they're connecting with their therapist, using the Zoom tools and all the rest of it. Now more than ever, this is the time to make sure that you're paying attention to your wellness.
Great, thank you. And we're coming toward the end of the program right now. In the next 20 seconds, can you tell us how people can learn more about the services at Island Therapy Solutions?
Absolutely. www.islandtherapysolutions.com. And the number is 340-719-7007. We're over in Gallows Bay, over the bistro, and we welcome you to just come and pick up a brochure and find out about our services. We have a full range of services for adults, for children, for families, those with autism spectrum disorder, adult and children. We have group therapy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grant. We're out of time now. And Dr. Etheridge, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
And we look forward to having you at another one of our programs.
Absolutely. Very much so.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.